Twin boys crash billionaire's wedding with their mom, then expose a DNA secret that shatters his world. Hi, my beautiful family. It's your Mr. Peter. Before we begin, let me wrap you in the most loving prayer I've ever written. Not just words, but a blessing poured from the depths of my soul. May God hold your heart so gently tonight that every hidden pain melts in His presence. May He wipe every tear you've cried in silence and replace it with peace that sings you to sleep. May He walk into your home with healing, restore what was lost, mend what was broken, and bless you in ways your hands aren't big enough to hold. I pray you feel surrounded by love, safe in His arms, and never forgotten. Because you're not. You are precious. You are needed. You are deeply, deeply loved. Now, my beautiful family. As you know, I've been unwell. I don't have the strength to speak right now, but my spirit is still strong and my heart is still writing. I'm still here with you. Every word, every moment. James will lend me his voice today, but the story, it's still mine. Still full of passion, emotion, and truth, just for you. And I want to gently ask you something that means the world to me. Please don't leave this video halfway. Watch it all the way to the end, not for the algorithm, but for us. Let your love be louder than silence. Let your support carry me through this season. Like this video, comment your prayer, whisper your love in the comment section. Let me feel your presence while I heal. Because that's what family does. We hold each other when one of us is down. I'm not giving up. I'm just resting, and I promise you, I'll be back stronger than ever with more stories that touch the soul. So now, take a deep breath. Open your heart. Let James speak the words. But know every word was written with all the love in my heart. Let the story begin together.
11 years ago, the Cornish estate. The October morning sun streamed through the massive windows of the Cornish mansion as 19-year-old Dani Andrews scrubbed the marble floors. Her second-hand uniform was carefully pressed, her dark hair pulled into a neat bun, but nothing could diminish the natural grace that made people stop and stare. She had been working for the Cornish family for 8 months, saving every dollar to pay for her grandmother's medical bills back in Alabama. "Morning, Dani," came a deep voice that always made her heart race. She looked up to see Sile Cornish descending the grand staircase, his black hair still messy from sleep, wearing only sweatpants and a t-shirt. At 23, he should have been just another spoiled rich boy, but Dani had glimpsed something different in his dark eyes, loneliness that matched her own. "Good morning, Mr. Cornish," she replied softly, fighting the urge to stare at his bare arms. "Dani, we've talked about this. Call me Sile." He paused at the bottom of the stairs, studying her face. "Mother's in the city until tomorrow. Staff has the weekend off." Her breath caught. For weeks, they had been circling each other like moths around flame. Brief touches when she served his coffee, lingering looks across crowded rooms, conversations that lasted longer than they should have. "I should finish cleaning," she whispered, but her voice betrayed her desire. Sile knelt beside her on the cold marble, gently taking the scrub brush from her hands. "The cleaning can wait." His voice was rough with want. "Dani, I think about you constantly. I know this is complicated. I know we're from different worlds, but..." She kissed him before he could finish, pouring months of suppressed longing into that single moment. In his arms, Dani forgot she was the hired help. She was simply a woman falling desperately in love. For 4 perfect months, they existed in stolen moments. Sile would dismiss the staff early so he could cook for Dani in the enormous kitchen, both of them laughing when he burned everything. They made love in his bedroom while rain drummed against the windows, and he whispered that money meant nothing compared to her smile. "I want to tell Mother about us," he said one November evening as they lay tangled in Egyptian cotton sheets. "I don't care what she thinks. I love you, Dani Andrews." Dani's heart soared and shattered simultaneously. "Sile, Your mother despises me. She looks at me like I'm dirt. Then we'll leave together. I'll walk away from all of this for you." But Serpentina Venomous had been watching from the shadows, plotting her son's future like a chess master. She had noticed how Sile's entire face changed when the beautiful maid entered a room, seen the way he found excuses to be wherever Danny was working. The trap was sprung on a gray December morning while Sile attended a business meeting in the city. "Miss Andrews," Serpentina's voice was silk wrapped around steel as Danny dusted the library. "We need to discuss some missing jewelry." Danny's blood turned to ice. "Missing jewelry, ma'am. My great-grandmother's diamond earrings vanished from my bedroom. The police are already en route." Serpentina's smile was pure venom. "Check her bag, Henderson." The security guard Danny had considered friendly pulled the priceless earrings from her cleaning supplies with rehearsed efficiency. The room spun as Danny realized she was trapped in an elaborate setup. "I never touched those," she gasped. "Someone put them there." "How disappointing," Serpentina sighed with practiced sorrow. "I actually thought you were different from the other thieves we've employed." When the police arrived, they treated Danny with the casual cruelty reserved for people they assumed were guilty. The handcuffs bit into her wrists as they led her away, her desperate pleas to speak with Sile falling on deaf ears. "My son wants nothing to do with you," Serpentina called after her. "I've already explained what kind of woman you really are." 6 humiliating hours later, Danny was released when Serpentina graciously decided not to press charges, claiming pity for the unfortunate girl. But the damage was complete. Danny returned to find her few belongings in garbage bags on the mansion's front steps, along with a note in Sile's precise handwriting: "Don't contact me again. Ever." 5 days later, Danny discovered she was pregnant. Present day, Rosalind Fairweather's estate. "Mama, you're making that face again." 10-year-old River Andrews looked up from his history homework with eyes that were heartbreakingly familiar. The same dark brown that haunted Danny's dreams. His twin brother Clay glanced up too, both boys immediately abandoning their schoolwork to focus on their mother with the laser attention children reserved for parental distress. "What face, baby?" Danny asked, though she knew exactly what River meant. "The sad face you make when you look at the old pictures," Clay explained, climbing into her lap despite being almost too tall for such comfort. Danny sighed, caught once again lost in memories. She was sitting in Rosalind's morning room, supposedly helping with correspondence, but her mind had drifted to the past like it always did when October arrived. "Just thinking about old times," she admitted. "Happy old times or crying old times?" River asked with the blunt wisdom of childhood. "Both, sweetheart, both." "Boys, come help me with these flowers," called Rosalind Fairweather from the doorway. At 80, she moved with the elegant authority of someone born to command respect, her silver hair perfectly styled despite spending the morning in her garden. "Grandma Rose!" both boys exclaimed, racing to hug the woman who had become their anchor. Rosalind had found Danny on Christmas Eve 10 years ago, sleeping in a broken-down car outside St. Mary's Church with 2 crying babies and nowhere else to go. Instead of calling social services, she had brought them home and offered Danny a position as her live-in companion. Over the years, she had taught Danny to carry herself like the lady she truly was. Lessons in grace, poise, and quiet strength. "Danny, dear," Rosalind said carefully once the boys were occupied arranging chrysanthemums, "I have news. The Cornish wedding is this Saturday." The coffee cup slipped from Danny's fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor. "What wedding?" "Sile is marrying that Russian girl, Anastasia Goldenheart. The announcement was in yesterday's society pages." Rosalind studied Danny's face with shrewd kindness. "I received an invitation, naturally. Old family connections." River and Clay exchanged the kind of meaningful look that twins perfected before they could walk. 3 years ago, they had discovered their father's photograph hidden in their mother's jewelry box, and Danny had finally told them a carefully edited version of the truth. "Are you going to go, Grandma Rose?" River asked innocently. "I was considering it," Rosalind replied slowly. "Though I would need a companion, and perhaps it's time certain truths saw daylight." Danny's hands trembled as she knelt to pick up the broken china. "Rosalind, I can't. I won't put my children through that humiliation." "Mama," Clay said quietly, "doesn't he deserve to know about us?" "He threw me away like I was nothing," Danny said bitterly, then immediately regretted her harsh words. "Maybe he didn't know everything," River suggested with startling maturity. "Maybe someone lied to him like kids lie to us at school sometimes." Rosalind moved to the window overlooking her prize-winning gardens. "Danny, I've carried a secret for 10 years. Margaret Thornton was deliberately watching that morning. She had seen how viciously Serpentina treated you and suspected something terrible was being planned." The silence that followed was broken only by the antique clock chiming the hour. Danny stared at the woman who had saved her life, processing this earth-shattering revelation. "Why didn't you say anything?" Danny whispered. "Because you made me promise not to interfere. You said you had too much pride to crawl back to a man who didn't trust you enough to hear your side. But Margaret documented everything, Danny. Every cruel detail of what Serpentina did to destroy your life." River and Clay watched their mother's face transform as old wounds split open, showing the raw pain that still lived beneath her carefully constructed composure. "It's time, Danny," Rosalind said gently. "Those boys deserve their father, and that man deserves to know what he lost to his mother's lies." Danny looked at her sons, these magnificent children who had never asked for anything but had given her everything. They deserved better than a father who was a ghost story and a mother who jumped at shadows. "I don't even know what I'd wear," she said, and Rosalind's smile could have powered the entire house. "Leave that to me, darling. I have just the thing." Chapter 2. The Wedding Crash, Realistic Version. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October sunshine that photographers dream about. Danny stood before Rosalind's antique mirror, barely recognizing the elegant woman staring back. The vintage Valentino gown from 1965 fit like it was made for her, deep sapphire silk that brought out her eyes and made her skin glow. Rosalind's pearl choker completed the transformation from caregiver to mysterious aristocrat. "You look like a movie star, Mama," River said from the doorway, his voice filled with awe. Both boys wore perfectly tailored navy suits that had belonged to Rosalind's late nephew, altered by Griffin's surprisingly skilled hands. They looked like young princes, their hair freshly cut and their shoes polished to mirror brightness. "A nervous movie star," Danny corrected, her fingers shaking as she tried to fasten her grandmother's bracelet. Clay approached to help with the delicate clasp. "Grandma Rose says being nervous means something important is happening." "Smart boy," Danny murmured, grateful for his steady little fingers. "Are you two ready for this?" "We've been ready forever," River said simply. "We want to meet our dad." The drive to the Cornish estate felt both endless and far too short. Griffin navigated the long line of luxury cars with professional ease, while Rosalind reviewed their cover story one final time. "Remember, you're my traveling companion, and the boys are my great-nephews from London," she said. "The invitation is legitimate, and we belong here as much as anyone." "What if people recognize me?" Danny asked, watching Bentleys and Rolls-Royces parade past her window. "Darling, you were a maid 11 years ago. Today you're a lady. Trust me, no one will make the connection." The Cornish mansion appeared around a bend in the drive, looking exactly as Danny remembered, but somehow smaller. The grounds had been transformed into something from a fairy tale. White silk tents scattered across the lawn, thousands of roses climbing every surface, and a red carpet leading to the ceremony area overlooking the ocean. "It's like a palace," Clay breathed, pressing his nose to the window. "Our daddy lives here?" River asked, sounding impressed despite himself. "He used to," Danny said quietly. "He has his own places now." Griffin joined the valet line, and Danny watched through tinted windows as the wedding guests made their entrance. Women in designer gowns that cost more than most people's annual salaries. Men in perfectly cut morning coats. Everyone dripping with the casual wealth that had once intimidated her so completely. "Second thoughts?" Rosalind asked gently. "17th and 18th thoughts," Danny admitted. "But we're here now." The valet opened their door with practiced deference, and they stepped into the world Danny had left behind. Immediately, conversations paused as heads turned to identify the striking woman accompanying the legendary Rosalind Fairweather. "Who is that gorgeous creature with Rosalind? Never seen her before. European royalty, perhaps. Those boys are absolutely stunning. Good breeding shows." They followed the other guests toward the ceremony area, a natural amphitheater carved into the cliff top with the Atlantic Ocean as backdrop. White chairs arranged in perfect rows faced an altar draped in cascading roses and baby's breath. "There's so many people," Clay whispered, suddenly shy. "Just remember," Danny said, squeezing both their hands, "we belong here. You're as good as anyone in this crowd." They found seats in the back section, Danny's heart hammering as she recognized the spot where she and Sile had shared their first kiss, now decorated for his wedding to another woman. The irony was almost unbearable. The ceremony music began, a string quartet playing something classical and appropriately romantic. The guests rose as the wedding party began their procession down the rose-petal aisle. Bridesmaids in blush pink glided past like elegant swans. Groomsmen in mourning coats followed with military precision. And then, Sile appeared, and Danny's world stopped spinning. 11 years had matured him in ways that took her breath away. His dark hair was touched with distinguished silver, his face leaner and more defined, his shoulders broader beneath his perfectly tailored mourning coat. He looked successful, confident, and utterly empty, like a beautiful statue with no soul behind the eyes. "Is that him?" Clay whispered, tugging on her sleeve. "Yes," Danny managed through her constricted throat. "He looks fancy," River observed, "but sad. Why does he look sad?" The bride's entrance answered that question completely. Anastasia Goldenheart was undeniably beautiful in a cold, perfect way. Platinum hair, flawless features, a dress that probably cost 6 figures. But there was no joy in her smile, no love in her eyes as she looked at her groom. This was a merger, not a marriage. The minister began speaking about love and commitment, words that felt like mockery given the obvious lack of genuine affection between bride and groom. Danny watched the man she had never stopped loving promise to honor a woman he clearly tolerated at best. "I need to go potty," River announced suddenly, his voice carrying farther than intended in the hushed ceremony space. "Now?" Danny hissed. "Really, really bad," he insisted, doing the universal child dance of urgent need. "Me too," Clay added, not to be outdone by his brother. Danny closed her eyes in mortification. Of course this would happen at the worst possible moment. "Boys, can you wait 5 minutes?" "No way," River said with brutal honesty. "I'm gonna explode." Several guests turned to look at them, some with amusement, others with annoyance. Danny had no choice but to escort her sons to the mansion's facilities before they caused a more dramatic scene. But as they walked up the aisle past the seated guests, River's clear voice rang out in the ceremonial quiet. "Mama, which one is our daddy? The one in the fancy jacket?" Every conversation stopped. Every head turned, 200 pairs of eyes focused on Danny and the boys with laser intensity. "Shh, baby," Danny whispered desperately, but the damage was done. "He's really tall," Clay observed loudly, completely oblivious to the sensation they were causing. "Do you think he knows about us?" The bride heard them first. Anastasia's head snapped around, her face draining of color when she saw Danny and the unmistakably Cornish-featured boys walking up the aisle. She grabbed Sile's arm, whispering frantically in his ear, her Russian accent thickening with panic. Sile turned slowly, following his bride's horrified gaze, and his eyes locked with Danny's across 50 feet of shocked silence. Recognition hit him like a physical blow, not just the woman he had never forgotten, but the two boys who looked exactly like him at that age. "Danny?" The word escaped him like a prayer, carrying clearly in the absolute quiet. The minister continued reading, unaware that his congregation was witnessing a drama more compelling than any ceremony. "If anyone has any reason why these two should not be wed, speak now or—" "Daddy!" River broke free from Danny's grip and ran toward the altar, his 10-year-old excitement overriding every lesson about proper behavior. "Daddy, we found you!" Clay followed his twin, both boys racing across the perfectly manicured grass toward the father they had only known from photographs. "Boys, stop!" Danny called, but they were already at the altar looking up at Sile with shining faces full of hope and joy. The wedding guests erupted in shocked whispers and gasps. Phone cameras appeared as if by magic, capturing every moment of the unfolding drama. "Are you really our daddy?" River asked breathlessly, staring up at Sile with Danny's eyes in Sile's face. "We've been waiting to meet you forever," Clay added, his voice filled with the innocent excitement of childhood. And in that moment, with 400 witnesses and rolling cameras, Sile Cornish's carefully constructed life imploded completely. "Mine?" he whispered, staring at the sons he never knew existed. That's when Anastasia fainted. Chapter 3. Children Tell the Truth. Anastasia's piercing scream cut through the October air like breaking crystal. She collapsed in a dramatic heap of white silk and diamonds, her tiara rolling across the rose petals as wedding guests leaped to their feet in chaos. "Get a doctor!" "Someone call 911. Is she breathing?" But the bride's theatrical faint was nothing compared to the bombshell that had just exploded in front of 400 society witnesses. River and Clay stood frozen at the altar, suddenly overwhelmed by the adult panic swirling around them. "Mama?" Clay's voice was small and scared as he looked back toward Danny. "Did we do something bad?" "Are we in trouble?" River added, his earlier excitement evaporating as photographers pushed closer and guests shouted questions. Danny's maternal instincts kicked into overdrive. She pushed through the crowd of gawking socialites, reaching her sons just as security guards appeared from nowhere. "It's okay, babies," she said, pulling them against her protective embrace. "You didn't do anything wrong." Sile stood motionless at the altar, his face cycling through shock, disbelief, and something that looked dangerously close to hope. He couldn't stop staring at the boys, River's familiar stubborn cowlick, Clay's way of tilting his head when confused, both of them carrying themselves with a dignity that spoke of careful, loving upbringing. 11 years, he said again, his voice barely audible above the chaos. 11 years, 2 months, and 18 days, Danny replied without looking at him, all her attention focused on comforting her frightened children. Serpentina finally recovered from her initial shock and descended from her front row throne like an avenging fury in designer black. "Security!" she shrieked, her voice cutting through the wedding mayhem. "Remove these people immediately. This is sabotage." "Don't yell at our mama," River said fiercely, stepping protectively in front of Danny, despite being barely tall enough to reach the woman's waist. "She's the best mama in the whole world." Clay added, joining his brother in their defensive formation. The raw protectiveness in their young voices silenced even Serpentina momentarily. These weren't random children causing disruption. They were little warriors defending their mother with the fierce loyalty only true family bonds could create. "How dare you bring your bastards?" Serpentina began viciously. "Enough!" The voice that cut through her tirade belonged to Rosalind Fairweather, who approached through the parting crowd with the authority of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. Every guest in the garden knew Rosalind's reputation. At 80, she commanded more social power than people half her age, and when she spoke, even Serpentina Venomous listened. "Serpentina," Rosalind said, her cultured voice carrying to every corner of the ceremony space. "These are children. Whatever your quarrel with their mother, you will not speak that way about innocent babies." "They're not babies, they're what?" Rosalind interrupted smoothly. "Beautiful, intelligent, well-raised. Yes, I quite agree." The crowd pressed closer, sensing that something monumentally significant was unfolding. This wasn't just a disrupted wedding. This was the revelation of secrets that had been buried for over a decade. "Grandma Rose," River said quietly, tugging on Rosalind's elegant sleeve. "Why is everyone so angry? We just wanted to meet our daddy." The simple statement, delivered with childhood's devastating honesty, hit the assembled crowd like lightning. There was no denying the boys' parentage now. They were clearly Cornish blood, from their dark hair to their strong jawlines to the way they stood with unconscious aristocratic bearing. "Your daddy?" one of the wedding guests whispered loudly enough to be heard. "Sile, are these really your children?" Sile was still staring at River and Clay, as if they were miracles he couldn't quite believe. "Danny," he said hoarsely, "how is this possible?" "The usual way," she replied with bitter humor. 9 months after you threw me out like garbage." "I didn't know, because you didn't want to know," Danny interrupted, her composure finally cracking. "You believed every lie about me without even asking for my side of the story." "What lies?" Clay asked, looking between his parents with the sharp intelligence children brought to family drama. "Someone told lies about our mama?" "Many lies," Rosalind said grimly, fixing Serpentina with a stare that could have melted steel. "Lies I witnessed firsthand." The color drained from Serpentina's face. "You don't know what you're talking about, you senile old—" "I know exactly what I'm talking about," Rosalind said with icy precision. "I was having tea with Margaret Thornton the morning you planted your great-grandmother's earrings in Danny's cleaning supplies." A collective gasp rose from the crowd. This was better than any soap opera, and everyone present knew they were witnessing a scandal that would dominate society pages for months. "That's impossible," Serpentina said, but her voice lacked conviction. Margaret was testing her new telephoto lens that morning, taking pictures of birds in the garden, Rosalind continued relentlessly. "She captured some very interesting images of your activities in the kitchen." "Pictures?" Sile's voice was dangerous now, the tone of a man who had built an empire and didn't tolerate deception. "Mother, what is she talking about?" River and Clay looked between the adults, trying to follow a conversation that was clearly about more than they understood. But they could sense the tension, the way their mother's hands trembled slightly as she held them. "What's a telephoto lens?" River asked innocently. "It's a special camera that can take pictures from far away," Rosalind explained gently. "And it showed your father's mother putting something in your mama's bag that didn't belong to her." Clay's young face scrunched in confusion. "But that's stealing and lying. Those are bad things." "Yes, sweetheart," Danny said quietly. "Very bad things." "So she's the reason our daddy went away?" River asked with the direct logic of childhood. "Yes, baby. She told lies that made your father think I was a bad person when I wasn't." The simple explanation, delivered at a child's level, made the truth crystal clear to everyone listening. Serpentina had destroyed a family to serve her own purposes, and now that family was standing in the ruins of what should have been her moment of triumph. "I want to see these alleged photographs," Serpentina demanded desperately. "They're in my safe," Rosalind replied smoothly. Along with Margaret's detailed diary entries about what she witnessed, she was quite disturbed by your behavior. Sile was staring at his mother now with an expression Danny had never seen before. Complete betrayal mixed with dawning understanding of years of manipulation. "You framed her," he said slowly, each word dropping like a stone. "You actually framed an innocent woman. I was protecting you from a gold-digging little—" "Stop," Sile commanded, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Don't say another word about the mother of my children. Children you never knew existed because of what I did," Danny added, her voice cracking with 11 years of suppressed pain. "Because of what she did," Sile corrected, his eyes never leaving his mother's face. "Because she destroyed my family before I even knew I had one." River stepped closer to Sile, studying his face with the intense focus children reserved for important moments. "Are you really our daddy?" he asked quietly. "Like, for real and forever?" The question, asked with such heartbreaking hope, finally broke through Sile's shock. He knelt down to his son's eye level, bringing himself into their world. "Yes," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm your father. I'm sorry I wasn't there before, but I didn't know you existed." "It's okay," Clay said with the generous forgiveness of childhood. "Mama said you were in heaven, but you're not dead after all. That's even better." "She told you I was dead?" Sile looked up at Danny with fresh pain in his eyes. "I thought it would hurt less than knowing their father chose not to want them," Danny explained quietly. The weight of 11 years of misunderstanding settled over all of them like heavy snow. The wedding guests stood transfixed, witnessing the unraveling of secrets that had shaped multiple lives. "But we knew you weren't really dead," River said matter-of-factly. "Mama cries when she looks at your picture, and people don't cry about dead people that long." "You kept my picture?" Sile asked Danny, wonder creeping into his voice. "I kept everything," she admitted. "I couldn't throw it away even when I hated you." "Do you still hate me?" Clay asked with childhood's brutal directness. Danny looked at this man who had broken her heart, then at the sons who had spent their lives wondering about their father. "I don't know what I feel anymore," she said honestly. "That's okay," River said wisely. "Feelings are confusing. Grandma Rose says that's normal." And in that moment, with cameras flashing and society watching, the Cornish family had their first honest conversation in 11 years. Messy, painful, and absolutely necessary. Chapter 4. The real story comes out. The aftermath of the wedding explosion was like trying to contain a hurricane in a teacup. 400 society guests milled around the estate grounds, nobody quite ready to leave the most scandalous event of the decade. Phone calls were being made, social media posts uploaded, and theories exchanged with the fervor typically reserved for royal gossip. "Everyone inside," Sile commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had built a business empire through sheer force of will. "We're not discussing this in front of an audience." "I'm not going anywhere with that woman," Anastasia declared from where she sat on a chair someone had brought her after her fainting spell. Her perfectly styled hair was now askew, her makeup smudged, and her designer gown wrinkled. "This is supposed to be my wedding day." "Your wedding day ended the moment my sons walked down that aisle," Sile said flatly, not even glancing at his former bride. "Griffin, would you mind helping us get to the house?" Griffin materialized beside them with the protective instincts of someone who genuinely cared about Danny and the boys. His imposing presence created a buffer zone as they made their way through the crowd of curious onlookers. "This way, Miss Danny," he said quietly, his familiar voice offering comfort in the chaos. River and Clay walked close to their mother, each holding one of her hands as they navigated through the sea of staring faces. The boys were quieter now, the magnitude of the situation beginning to sink in despite their young age. "Mama," Clay whispered as they climbed the mansion's front steps, "are we famous now?" "I hope not, baby," Danny replied, remembering exactly how much she hated being the center of attention. The mansion's interior was exactly as Danny remembered: soaring ceilings, marble floors, and an overwhelming sense of old money elegance. But where she had once felt intimidated, now she simply felt tired. This house held too many painful memories. Sile led them to his father's study, a room that had always been his sanctuary growing up. The dark wood paneling and leather-bound books created an atmosphere of serious conversation, which was exactly what they needed. "I remember this room," Clay said unexpectedly, looking around with interest. "No, you don't," River corrected his brother. "We've never been here before." "But Mama described it," Clay explained, "when she told us stories about the nice grandfather we never met." Sile's throat tightened. "You told them about my father." "He was kind to me when no one else was," Danny said simply. "I wanted them to know there was goodness in your family." "Press and company accepted," Rosalind added pointedly, settling herself in one of the leather chairs and fixing Serpentina with a withering stare. Serpentina followed them into the study like a woman walking to her execution, her earlier bluster replaced by obvious desperation. She knew the photographs Rosalind mentioned could destroy not just her reputation, but her freedom. Anastasia swept in dramatically, her wedding dress trailing behind her like the train of a dethroned queen. "This is absolutely insane, Sile. We had agreements, contracts, a prenuptial arrangement." "All of which became void the moment I discovered I'm a father," Sile interrupted, his attention entirely focused on the boys who were examining his father's book collection with careful hands. "They could belong to anyone," Anastasia insisted desperately. "Where's the proof? DNA tests? Birth certificates?" It was River who answered, turning from the bookshelf with the matter-of-fact tone children used for obvious truths. "We look exactly like him. Everyone can see it. And we have his birthday," Clay added helpfully. "Mama told us our daddy was born on March 15th, and he was born on March 15th. That's not a coincidence." "You know my birthday?" Sile asked, something tender and broken in his voice. "We know lots of things about you," River said seriously. "Mama told us stories." "What kind of stories?" The boys exchanged glances, having one of their silent twin conversations before Clay spoke for both of them. "Good stories, mostly. About how you used to read to your daddy in this room when he was sick. About how you always shared your dessert with the staff at Christmas. About how you cried when your puppy died." Each innocent revelation hit Sile like a physical blow. Danny had preserved his humanity for their sons, had chosen to focus on his kindness rather than his cruelty. "You made me sound like a good person," he said to Danny, wonder and guilt warring in his expression. "You were a good person," she replied quietly. "You just made a terrible mistake." "A mistake I can prove was orchestrated," Rosalind interjected smoothly, pulling out her phone with the efficiency of someone far younger than her 80 years. "Margaret's photographs are quite clear, Serpentina." "You can't possibly have," Serpentina began. "Margaret Thornton documented everything," Rosalind continued implacably. "She had been watching your behavior toward Danny for weeks, Serpentina. The way you treated that sweet girl disturbed her greatly." She swiped through her phone with surprising technological skill, then turned the screen toward the room. The photograph was clear and unmistakable: Serpentina in the mansion's kitchen, sliding diamond earrings into a cleaning supply bag. "That could be anyone," Serpentina said weakly. "Margaret suspected you were planning something vindictive," Rosalind replied coldly. "She deliberately positioned herself at her kitchen window that morning because she knew you were up to no good. The timestamp shows the exact moment you planted the evidence, and her detailed notes describe every step of your scheme." The room fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock. River and Clay were watching the adults with the intense focus children brought to moments they sensed were life-changing. "So she really is the bad guy," Clay said finally, looking at Serpentina with disappointment rather than anger. "That's sad." "Why is it sad?" River asked his brother. "Because now Daddy knows his mama is mean, and that must hurt his feelings." The simple observation, delivered with childhood's devastating insight, broke something in Sile's chest. His sons were worried about his emotional well-being, even as they learned the truth about why their family had been destroyed. "Boys," he said hoarsely, kneeling down to their level, "I need you to understand something. What my mother did was wrong, very wrong, but what I did was worse." "What did you do?" River asked with the directness that still caught adults off guard. "I didn't trust your mother when I should have. I believed lies instead of listening to her. I threw away the most important thing in my life because I was scared and stupid." "Everyone makes mistakes," Clay said generously. "Mama says that's how we learn." "Some mistakes are bigger than others," Sile said, looking at Danny with eyes full of regret. "Some mistakes cost you everything." "But you found us again," River pointed out with optimistic logic. "So maybe it wasn't everything." "Maybe not," Sile agreed, hope flickering in his voice. "Maybe there's still a chance to fix what I broke." "Fixing things takes time," Clay warned seriously. "When I broke Mama's favorite cup, it took weeks to find all the pieces. And even when we glued it back together, you could still see the cracks," River added. "But it was still a cup," Clay finished. "And Mama said sometimes broken things are stronger than they were before." Danny felt tears threatening as she listened to her sons offer wisdom that most adults never learned. They had taken the hardest truths of their young lives and found hope in them. "Your mama is very smart," Sile said softly. "The smartest mama in the world," both boys agreed with fierce loyalty. Anastasia, who had been watching this family reunion with growing horror, finally found her voice again. "This is touching but completely irrelevant," she announced. "Sile, we have a legal contract, society expectations, my family's reputation." "Your family's reputation will survive," Sile said, standing and facing his former fiancée with businesslike detachment. "The engagement is over, Anastasia. I'll make sure you're compensated for any inconvenience, but I can't marry someone I don't love when the woman I do love is standing right here." "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." As Anastasia stormed out in a rustle of silk and wounded pride, River tugged on Danny's hand. "Mama, does this mean we can go home now? All this yelling is making my head hurt." "Yes, sweetheart," Danny said, gathering both boys close. "We can go home." "All of us?" Clay asked hopefully, looking between his parents. "Can Daddy come too?" The question hung in the air like a bridge neither Danny nor Sile was sure they were ready to cross. "If your mother will let me," Sile said quietly. "I'd like to try." Chapter 5. The Boys Don't Forgive Easily. The drive back to Rosalind's mansion was conducted in careful silence. Sile had followed them in his own car, maintaining a respectful distance, as if he understood that earning a place in their family would require more than just showing up. Danny sat between River and Clay in the back seat, feeling their small bodies grow heavier against her as the adrenaline of the afternoon faded. "Mama," River whispered as they turned into Rosalind's driveway, "is he really going to stay now?" I don't know, baby, Danny admitted honestly. We'll have to see. What if he changes his mind again? Clay asked, voicing the fear that lived in all their hearts. Then we'll be okay, Danny said firmly. Just like we've always been okay. But as they pulled up to the familiar Victorian mansion with its wraparound porch and towering oak trees, Danny felt anything but okay. For 10 years, this place had been their sanctuary, their safe harbor from a world that had proven itself dangerous. Now Sile was here, and everything felt uncertain again. "Boys," Rosalind said gently as Griffin opened their car doors, "why don't you go upstairs and change out of those fancy clothes? Your father and mother need to talk." River and Clay exchanged glances, then looked at Sile's car pulling up behind them. "He's going to come inside," River asked carefully. "If you'll allow it," Rosalind replied. "This is your home too. You have a say in who's welcome here." The boys considered this with the seriousness they brought to all important decisions. Finally, Clay nodded. "He can come in," he decided, "but he has to follow our rules." "What rules?" Danny asked, curious despite her anxiety. "No yelling at Mama," River said immediately, "and no making her cry. And no leaving without saying goodbye," Clay added with devastating insight. These were the rules born from a decade of watching their mother navigate the world alone, of being her protectors as much as her children. Danny felt her throat tighten with pride and heartbreak. "Those seem like very reasonable rules," she managed. Sile approached the house slowly, clearly understanding that he was entering sacred space. He had changed from his wedding tuxedo into jeans and a sweater, looking more like the young man Danny had fallen in love with than the polished billionaire from the ceremony. "This is beautiful," he said, taking in the elegant Victorian architecture and carefully maintained gardens. "How long have you lived here?" 10 years, Danny replied. "Rosalind saved us when we had nowhere else to go." The admission hung between them, another reminder of the consequences of his abandonment. Sile's face showed he understood exactly what those words meant. "Boys," Rosalind said diplomatically, "would you mind showing your father the garden while I help your mother with tea?" River and Clay looked at each other, having another of their silent conversations, before nodding reluctantly. "Okay," River said, "but we're not calling you Dad yet." "You have to earn that," Clay added with the brutal honesty of childhood. "What should I call you then?" Sile asked seriously, as if their answer mattered more than any business negotiation. "Just Sile," River decided, "until we're sure you're staying." They led him toward the back garden with the careful politeness they had been taught to show strangers. Danny watched from the kitchen window as her sons pointed out their tree fort, their garden plots, and the tire swing Griffin had hung from the massive oak tree. "They're protecting themselves," Rosalind observed, joining her at the window. "They're smart too," Danny replied. "He hurt us once. They don't want to be hurt again." "And what about you? Are you protecting yourself too?" Danny considered the question as she watched Sile listen intently to something River was explaining about their vegetable garden. He was giving her sons his complete attention, as if their words were the most important thing in the world. "I have to," she said finally, "for their sake if not my own." Outside, the boys were subjecting Sile to what appeared to be an interrogation disguised as a garden tour. Danny could see them asking questions, watching his face carefully for reactions, testing him in ways only children could get away with. "Can you throw a baseball?" Clay was asking when Danny stepped outside with a tray of iced tea. "I can," Sile replied. "Can you catch one?" "Of course," River said with mild offense. "We're not babies." "We play on the town league," Clay added proudly. "River's the best shortstop in our division." "Clay's a really good catcher too," River said loyally. "He never drops anything." "I'd love to see you play sometime," Sile said carefully. "If you wouldn't mind." "Maybe," River said noncommittally. "We'll have to see." The conditional acceptance was progress, Danny supposed, but she could see the careful distance her sons were maintaining. They wanted to know their father, but they weren't ready to trust him yet. "Boys," she called, "come have something to drink." They gathered around the wrought iron table where Danny had spent countless afternoons helping with homework and listening to the adventures of their school days. Sile looked out of place in this domestic scene, too large and too unfamiliar. "So," Clay said, settling into his usual chair, "what do you do for work?" "I'm in real estate," Sile replied. "I buy and sell buildings." "Like houses?" River asked. "Sometimes houses, but mostly bigger buildings. Office buildings, hotels, shopping centers." "Are you rich?" Clay asked with typical childhood directness. "Clay," Danny warned gently. "It's okay," Sile said. "Yes, I'm rich, but money isn't the most important thing." "What is?" River challenged. "Family," Sile said immediately. "The people you love. I learned that too late." "Mama always says the best things in life are free," Clay informed him, "like hugs and bedtime stories and Saturday morning pancakes." "Your mama is right," Sile agreed. "I've spent 11 years learning that lesson." The boys absorbed this information with the serious consideration they gave to all adult admissions. Finally, River spoke for both of them. "We have some questions," he announced. "Okay," Sile said, bracing himself. "Why didn't you look for us?" Clay asked. "When Mama was pregnant, why didn't you try to find out what happened to her?" The question hit Sile like a physical blow. Danny could see him struggling with how to answer honestly without destroying his mother further in their eyes. "I was young and scared and stupid," he said finally. "I believed lies about your mother instead of trusting what I knew in my heart. By the time I realized my mistake, I thought it was too late." "It's never too late to say sorry," River said with the wisdom children learned from countless minor conflicts and reconciliations. "You're right," Sile said, "and I am sorry. I'm sorrier than I can ever express." "Are you sorry enough to never do it again?" Clay pressed. "Yes. I promise I will never walk away from you again." "Promises are hard to keep," River observed skeptically. "This one isn't," Sile said firmly. "This is the easiest promise I've ever made." The boys exchanged glances, processing this information with the careful deliberation they brought to all important decisions. "We need to think about it," Clay announced finally. "That's fair," Sile agreed. "And you can't live here right away," River added. "You have to visit first, like dating but for families." Danny nearly choked on her iced tea. "Where did you learn about dating?" "TV," both boys said in unison, as if this explained everything. "So you'll let me visit?" Sile asked hopefully. "Maybe," River said cautiously, "if you follow our rules." "Which are?" "No yelling at Mama," Clay recited. "No making her cry. No leaving without saying goodbye. And no trying to change our routine," River added. "We like our life the way it is." "Those are very reasonable rules," Sile said solemnly. "I accept them completely." "Good," Clay said with satisfaction. "You can come for dinner tomorrow if you want. But Mama has to say yes too." All three males turned to look at Danny, waiting for her decision. She felt the weight of their expectations, the fragile hope in Sile's eyes, and the protective skepticism in her sons' faces. "Dinner tomorrow," she said finally. "But that's all I'm committing to right now." "That's enough," Sile said quietly. "That's more than I deserve." "Way more," River agreed matter-of-factly, earning him a sharp look from his mother. "River," Danny warned. "What?" "It's true. He left us. Now he has to prove he wants to stay." And with that devastating summary of their situation, her 10-year-old son picked up his glass and headed inside, leaving the adults to contemplate the wisdom of children who had learned early that love without trust was just pretty words. Chapter 6. Earning Forgiveness the Hard Way. 3 weeks into their careful courtship, Sile had established a routine that revolved entirely around his newfound family. Every morning at 7:30, he would arrive with fresh bagels from the bakery the boys preferred, staying for breakfast before they left for school. Every evening at 6, he would return for dinner, helping with homework and reading bedtime stories with the dedication of someone making up for lost time. "He's trying really hard," Clay observed one morning as they watched Sile's car pull into the driveway from their bedroom window. "Maybe too hard," River replied with the skepticism that had become his default setting where their father was concerned. Danny understood her son's caution. They had built their lives around the certainty that it was just the three of them against the world. Adding a fourth person, even one who shared their DNA, felt dangerous to children who had learned early that adults could disappear without warning. "Good morning," Sile called as he entered the kitchen, his arms full of bakery bags and the newspapers the boys liked to read over breakfast. "How did everyone sleep?" "Fine," River said politely but without warmth. "I had a dream about dinosaurs," Clay offered, always the more sociable twin. "They were having a tea party." "That sounds like a very civilized group of dinosaurs," Sile said seriously, earning a small smile. These small moments of connection were balanced by equally small rejections. When Sile had offered to drive the boys to school, they had politely declined, preferring Griffin's familiar presence. When he had suggested a weekend trip to his beach house, they had exchanged glances and asked if they could think about it, which everyone understood meant no. "They're testing you," Rosalind had explained to him privately. "Children who have been abandoned once develop very sophisticated ways of protecting themselves from being hurt again." "How long do you think the testing phase will last?" Sile had asked. "As long as it takes," she had replied, "and not one day less." The breakthrough came unexpectedly on a rainy Thursday evening. Danny was upstairs helping River with a particularly challenging math assignment when they heard Clay's voice from the garden, high-pitched with distress. "Mama, come quick, something's wrong." Danny and River raced downstairs to find Clay standing by the back door, tears streaming down his face as he pointed toward the oak tree where his and River's tree fort had been built. "Buster's stuck," he sobbed. "He climbed too high and now he can't get down." Buster was the neighbor's orange tabby cat, a friendly creature who often visited their garden, but had apparently misjudged his climbing abilities. The cat was perched on a branch nearly 20 feet up, yowling pitifully as rain soaked his fur. "Oh no," Danny said, grabbing her phone. "I'll call the fire department." "They won't come for a cat unless it's been stuck for 24 hours, Griffin said grimly, appearing with a ladder that was clearly too short for the job. "But he'll be scared all night," Clay wailed, "and wet and hungry." River was standing beside his brother, both boys staring up at the trapped cat with the kind of desperate concern children reserved for animals in distress. Danny felt her heart break watching their faces. "I'll get him." Everyone turned to see Sile assessing the tree with the calculating gaze of someone solving a problem. He had already removed his suit jacket and was rolling up his sleeves. "Sile, that's too dangerous," Danny protested. "The branches are wet and slippery." "I've been climbing this tree since I was younger than the boys," he said simply. "I know which branches will hold my weight." "But if you fall." "I won't fall." He looked directly at River and Clay, who were watching him with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "I promise I'll get Buster down safely." What followed was the most terrifying 10 minutes of Danny's life. She watched the man she was learning to love again climb steadily through the rain-slicked branches, talking softly to the frightened cat as he worked his way higher. "It's okay, buddy," Sile's voice drifted down through the rain. "I'm almost there." River and Clay stood motionless below, their faces tilted up toward the drama unfolding above them. Danny could see them holding their breath every time Sile reached for a new handhold. "He's really doing it," Clay whispered in amazement. He's not afraid, River added, and Danny could hear the respect creeping into his voice despite his efforts to remain aloof. When Sile finally reached Buster, the cat immediately climbed onto his shoulders with the desperate gratitude of the truly rescued. The descent was even more treacherous, with Sile using only one hand while the cat clung to his shirt. "Almost down," he called, his voice strained with effort. The moment his feet touched solid ground, both boys rushed toward him, their earlier reserve forgotten in their relief and excitement. "You did it," Clay exclaimed, gently taking the wet cat from Sile's shoulders. "You saved him." "That was so cool," River added, his usual skepticism replaced by genuine admiration. "You climbed all the way to the top." Sile was soaked and muddy, his expensive shirt torn from the cat's claws, but he was grinning like he had just conquered Mount Everest. "Buster's fine," he said, checking the cat for injuries. "Just scared and wet." "You're bleeding," Danny noticed, seeing scratches on his arms from the rough bark. "It's nothing," Sile said, but he allowed her to lead him inside to clean the wounds. As Danny dabbed antiseptic on the cuts covering his forearms, River and Clay hovered nearby, chattering about the rescue with the kind of excited energy that followed any dramatic event. "Were you scared?" Clay asked. "A little," Sile admitted honestly. "But sometimes being scared doesn't matter if something important needs doing." "Saving Buster was important," River agreed seriously. "He's our friend." "Then it was important to me too," Sile said simply. Something shifted in the room's atmosphere. Danny felt it first, a subtle relaxation in her son's posture, a warmth in their voices that hadn't been there before. Sile had passed some crucial test without even realizing he was being tested. "Sile?" Clay said quietly as Danny finished bandaging the deepest scratch. "Yes. Thank you for saving our friend." "Yeah," River added. "That was really brave." "Anyone would have done the same thing," Sile said. "No, they wouldn't," River said with the matter-of-fact certainty of childhood. "Mrs. Peterson next door just said, 'Cats always come down eventually,' when we asked her for help. And the mailman said he didn't have time," Clay added indignantly. "But you stopped everything to help," River observed, "even though you were wearing fancy clothes." "Fancy clothes can be replaced," Sile said. "Friends can't." The boys absorbed this wisdom with the serious consideration they gave to all important life lessons. Finally, Clay spoke for both of them. "We think you can call us your sons now," he announced. "If you want to." "And we'll call you Dad," River added more quietly. "If that's okay." Sile's throat worked for a moment before he could speak. "That's more than okay," he managed. "That's everything I've ever wanted." "Good," Clay said with satisfaction, "because sons are supposed to help their dads, and you're going to need help learning all our rules." "What rules?" Sile asked, amused. "Saturday morning pancakes," River began, counting on his fingers. "No vegetables except carrots. Bedtime stories have to have different voices for each character. And you have to check for monsters under our beds," Clay added seriously. "Even though we're too old to believe in monsters, it's still part of the job." "I'll remember all of that," Sile promised solemnly. That night, as Danny tucked her sons into bed, she found them whispering excitedly about their father's heroic rescue. "Mama," River said as she kissed his forehead, "do you think Dad will really stay this time?" "I think he will," Danny said, surprised to realize she actually believed it. "I think he's learned what really matters." "Good," Clay mumbled sleepily. "I like having a dad who saves cats." As Danny turned off their light and headed downstairs, she found Sile on the back porch, staring up at the tree he had climbed to save a stranger's cat for the sake of two boys who barely knew him. "Regrets?" she asked, settling beside him on the porch swing. "None," he said immediately. Best 10 minutes of my life, even though you nearly broke your neck? Especially because I nearly broke my neck. He turned to look at her, his eyes serious in the porch light. They called me Dad, Danny. I heard. I know it's just a word, but it's not just a word, she interrupted gently. It's a promise. They're trusting you with their hearts, Sile. Don't break them. I won't, he said fiercely. I'd climb 1,000 trees before I'd hurt those boys. I believe you, Danny said, and realized with surprise that she meant it completely. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars appear through the breaking clouds, both of them understanding that something fundamental had shifted. Sile was no longer a stranger trying to earn a place in their family. He was family, with all the terrifying, wonderful responsibility that entailed. Chapter 7. The Mother's Broken Heart. 2 months after the cat rescue that had earned Sile his son's trust, Danny found herself in unfamiliar territory, learning how to be part of a family of 4 instead of 3. The adjustment was harder than she had expected, not because Sile was difficult to live with, but because opening her heart again felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. She was arranging flowers in Rosalind's sunroom when she heard the sound that had become the soundtrack of their new life. Her son's laughter mixing with their father's deeper chuckles as they worked on some project in the garden. Through the windows, she could see them building an elaborate obstacle course for the neighborhood cats, complete with ramps and tunnels made from cardboard boxes. We need to make it harder, River was saying as he adjusted a wooden plank. Buster's too smart for easy obstacles. What about a moat? Clay suggested, with water and maybe some fish. Cats don't like water, Sile reminded them, his voice warm with amusement. How about a maze instead? Yes, both boys exclaimed, immediately beginning to rearrange their creation. Danny smiled despite the tightness in her chest. Watching Sile with their sons was like seeing a piece of her heart that had been missing for 11 years suddenly slot back into place. But with that completion came vulnerability that terrified her. You're brooding again, Rosalind observed, entering the sunroom with her morning tea. I'm not brooding. I'm thinking. Same thing in your case. Rosalind settled into her favorite chair, studying Danny with shrewd eyes. What's troubling you, dear? Danny continued arranging the white roses, using the familiar task to keep her hands busy while her mind churned. What if this is all too good to be true? What if I'm setting us all up for heartbreak? What makes you think that? Because I've been here before, Danny said, her voice barely above a whisper. I loved him completely once, and he threw me away like I was nothing. What's to stop him from doing it again? Through the window, they watched Sile patiently help Clay measure distances between obstacles, his expensive clothes already dirty from kneeling in the garden dirt. Look at him, Rosalind said gently. Really look at him, Danny. That man has spent 2 months learning your son's favorite foods, their bedtime routines, their fears and dreams. Does that look like someone planning to leave? It looks like someone trying very hard, Danny admitted. But effort and permanence aren't the same thing. The truth was, Danny had been waiting for the other shoe to drop. For Sile to realize that domestic life was more work than glamour, that being a father meant sleepless nights when the boys were sick and exhausting days filled with Little League games and homework battles. She kept expecting him to remember his old life of freedom and wealth and decide this wasn't worth the effort. You know, Rosalind said thoughtfully, Margaret Thornton left me something else besides those photographs of Serpentina's crimes. Danny's attention sharpened. What do you mean? Letters, dozens of them, written but never sent. Rosalind's voice was soft with memory. Sile wrote to you, Danny, every month for 2 years after you left. The world seemed to tilt sideways. That's impossible. Margaret lived next door to the mansion, remember? She saw him walking to the mailbox late at night, saw him standing there for hours sometimes before finally coming back with the letters still in his hand. Danny sank into the nearest chair, her legs suddenly unsteady. "He wrote to me?" Margaret was quite the observer. She became curious enough to check the mailbox after he left one night. "Found a letter addressed to you, care of your grandmother in Alabama." "I never got any letters." "Because he never sent them." Margaret said he would write them and then stand at the mailbox, sometimes for an hour, before finally bringing them back inside. The revelation hit Danny like a physical blow. While she had been struggling through pregnancy alone, believing herself completely abandoned, Sile had been writing letters he was too proud or too scared to send. "What did they say?" she whispered. "I don't know." Margaret only saw the outside of the envelopes. "But she watched him do this ritual every month for 2 years, Danny. 2 years of letters he wrote, but couldn't bring himself to mail." Outside, River had apparently decided the obstacle course needed a dramatic element. He was directing Sile and Clay in the construction of what appeared to be a drawbridge made from a cardboard box and some rope. "It has to move up and down," River was explaining with engineering precision. "Otherwise, it's just a regular bridge, and that's boring." "You're absolutely right," Sile agreed seriously. "No boring bridges in our cat obstacle course." "He's different now," Danny said, watching him tie knots with the same focus he had once brought to billion-dollar deals. "How so?" "He's present. Really present. Before, even when we were together, part of him was always somewhere else. Always thinking about work or his mother's expectations or what people would think." She paused, searching for the right words. "Now he's just here. Completely here." "That's what losing everything teaches you," Rosalind said quietly. "The difference between what you thought you wanted and what you actually need." "What if I'm not brave enough to trust him again?" Danny asked, voicing her deepest fear. "What if I'm too broken to be the woman he needs?" "Oh, my dear child." Rosalind reached over to squeeze her hand. "You're not broken. You're cautious. There's a world of difference." "The boys trust him so easily," Danny marveled, watching Clay demonstrate the proper way to crawl through a cardboard tunnel. "They just decided he was their father and moved on." "Children are remarkably resilient when they feel safe," Rosalind observed. "And those boys have never doubted that you would protect them, no matter what. That security gives them freedom to take risks. What if I can't give him what he needs? What if I'm too scared to love him the way I used to?" "Who says you have to love him the way you used to?" Rosalind asked with gentle wisdom. "You're not 19 anymore, Danny. Neither is he. Maybe the love you build now will be stronger because it's built on truth instead of dreams." A commotion in the garden drew their attention back to the window. Buster had apparently arrived to test the obstacle course and was currently stuck halfway through the tunnel, his orange tail the only visible part of him. "He's too fat for the tunnel," Clay announced with scientific observation. "He's not fat, he's fluffy," River corrected loyally. "The tunnel's too small." "Same thing," Clay said pragmatically. Sile was already on his knees, carefully widening the cardboard opening while speaking soothingly to the trapped cat. "It's okay, Buster. We'll have you out in just a second." "He talks to cats like they understand him," Danny said, surprised by the fondness in her own voice. "He talks to everyone like they understand him," Rosalind corrected, "including you when you let him." That evening, after the boys were in bed and the cat obstacle course had been deemed a complete success, Danny found herself alone with Sile on the back porch. It had become their routine. These quiet moments after the chaos of family life settled into stillness. "The boys want to enter Buster in some kind of cat agility competition," Sile said, settling beside her on the porch swing. "Apparently, it's a real thing." "Of course they do," Danny laughed. They're convinced he's a feline genius. Maybe he is. He figured out how to get us to build him a personal playground. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that had developed between them over weeks of shared dinners and bedtime stories and small domestic moments. But Danny could feel the weight of unspoken things pressing between them. "Sile," she said finally, "Rosalind told me something today about letters you wrote but never sent." His entire body went still. "She told you about those?" "Margaret Thornton saw you at the mailbox. 2 years' worth of letters." "I should have sent them," he said quietly. "I wrote them every month, pouring my heart out, begging you to forgive me. But I was too ashamed, too afraid you'd tell me to leave you alone forever." "What did they say?" "Everything I should have said before you left. That I loved you. That I believed my mother's lies because I was a coward. That I was sorry." His voice broke slightly. "That I missed you every day and would do anything to take back what I'd done." Danny felt tears threatening. "I thought you had forgotten me completely." "Forget you?" Sile turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the porch light. "Danny, I tried to forget you. I dated other women, threw myself into work, traveled to every continent, trying to outrun the memory of your smile. Nothing worked. You were in my blood, in my dreams, in every song on the radio. Then why didn't you look for me?" "Because I thought I had no right to," he said simply. "I thought I had hurt you too badly to ever earn forgiveness. It wasn't until I saw you at the wedding, saw what an incredible woman you'd become, that I realized I'd been wrong about that too." "I kept waiting," Danny admitted. "For months after you threw me out, I kept thinking you'd realize the truth and come find me. When you didn't, I'm here now," he said softly. "I know it's 11 years too late, but I'm here now. And if you'll let me, I want to spend the rest of my life making up for those lost years." Danny looked at this man who had been her first love, her greatest heartbreak, and now possibly her second chance. She thought about the letters he had written but never sent, the years of regret he had carried, the way he looked at their sons like they were miracles. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I," he admitted, terrified. "But I think maybe being scared together is better than being safe apart. What if it doesn't work? What if we hurt each other again?" "Then we'll figure it out together," he said, taking her hand. "The boys need both of us, Danny. And maybe we need each other too." For the first time in 11 years, Danny allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, broken hearts could heal stronger than they were before. Chapter 8. Building a Family Slowly. 2 weeks after Christmas, Danny woke up to the sound of River coughing, the deep, rattling cough that every mother recognized as trouble. She was out of bed instantly, but when she reached the boys' room, she found Sile already there, feeling River's forehead with the careful touch of someone learning to be a father. "He's burning up," Sile said quietly, not wanting to wake Clay. "Should I call a doctor?" "It's probably just flu," Danny said, slipping into automatic mother mode. "But we need to get his fever down. Can you carry him to the bathroom while I get medicine?" What followed was Danny's first real test of trusting Sile with their children's welfare. She watched him hold River gently while she ran a lukewarm bath, saw him speak in soothing tones when their son shivered and complained. "I don't feel good, Daddy," River whimpered, and Danny's heart clenched at hearing him use the title so naturally. "I know, buddy," Sile said, supporting him in the shallow bathwater. "But Mama's going to make you feel better, okay?" The next 3 days were a blur of medicine schedules, temperature checks, and sleepless nights. Danny expected Sile to step back, to let her handle the unglamorous parts of parenting. Instead, he took turns sitting up with River, reading stories in hoarse whispers, and bringing endless cups of juice. "You don't have to do this," Danny said on the second night, finding him asleep in the chair beside River's bed. "Yes, I do," he said simply when he woke. He's my son. This is what fathers do. When River finally recovered, Clay immediately came down with the same bug. Danny braced herself for Sile to reach his limit, but he simply rolled up his sleeves and started the whole process over again. 2 sick kids in 1 week, she said, watching him help Clay with medicine that tasted terrible. Still think family life is glamorous? I think it's real, he replied, wiping Clay's fevered face with a cool cloth. I've spent my whole life chasing things that looked perfect from the outside. This is the first time I've ever wanted to be exactly where I am. Week 3 brought their first real fight. Danny came home from volunteering at the shelter to find Sile helping the boys with homework at the kitchen table, and they were doing it completely wrong. That's not how we do math homework, she said, seeing River's assignment covered in eraser marks. I was just showing him a different method, Sile said defensively. He has a method that works. You can't just change everything. I was trying to help by undermining everything I've taught them. The argument escalated quickly, with both of them saying things they didn't mean while River and Clay watched with worried faces. It ended with Sile leaving and Danny crying over the dishes, convinced she had been right to keep her walls up. Mama, Clay said quietly, appearing beside her at the sink. Are you and Daddy getting divorced? We're not married, baby. Are you going to stop being a family? The question broke Danny's heart. I don't know. Sile returned an hour later with flowers and an apology. I'm sorry, he said in front of the boys. You're their mother. You know what's best for them. I'm sorry too, Danny admitted. I'm still learning how to share them. Can we all say sorry together? River suggested with the wisdom of childhood. And then have ice cream? Family meeting, Clay declared solemnly, with ice cream for peace talks. They spent an hour that night establishing ground rules for homework, discipline, and decision-making. It wasn't romantic, but it was real. The unglamorous work of blending a family. This is harder than I thought it would be, Danny admitted as they cleaned up ice cream bowls. Good, Sile said, surprising her. Easy things don't last. Hard things that you fight for do. Week 5 brought a different kind of test. River came home from school with a black eye and a note from the principal about fighting. Danny's first instinct was to handle it alone, but Sile was already kneeling in front of their son. What happened, buddy? Marcus Henderson said I don't have a real dad because you weren't there when I was born, River said, his voice small and ashamed. Danny felt fury rise in her chest, but Sile's response surprised her. You know what? He said calmly. Marcus is right. I wasn't there when you were born, and I should have been. But I'm here now, and I'm going to be here every day for the rest of your life. But he said, Marcus is dealing with his own problems at home, Sile continued. Hurt people sometimes try to hurt others. That doesn't make it okay to fight, but I understand why you did. Are you mad at me? I'm proud of you for defending our family, Sile said seriously. But next time, come get me. That's what dads are for. Danny watched this interaction with growing amazement. Sile was handling their son's first real crisis with exactly the right balance of understanding and guidance. Grounded? River asked hopefully. 1 week, Sile said, and you have to write Marcus an apology note, not for defending yourself, but for throwing the first punch. That's fair, River agreed. That night, after the boys were asleep, Danny found herself really looking at Sile for the first time in weeks. You were perfect with him today, she said. I was winging it completely, he admitted. I have no idea what I'm doing most of the time. Welcome to parenthood. None of us know what we're doing. Are you starting to trust me? He asked quietly. Getting there, she said honestly. It's scary, letting someone else make decisions about my babies. Our babies, he corrected gently. Our babies, she agreed, and felt something shift in her chest. Week 7 brought Valentine's Day, and Danny woke up to find the kitchen filled with handmade decorations and the smell of pancakes burning. "We wanted to make you breakfast in bed," Clay announced proudly, "but Daddy can't flip pancakes." "I'm learning," Sile said defensively, scraping charcoal off another failed attempt. "Let me help," Danny laughed, moving to stand beside him at the stove. For the first time, their bodies bumped naturally as they cooked together, and neither of them pulled away. "Happy Valentine's Day, Mama," River said, presenting her with a card covered in glitter and hearts. "From all your boys," Clay added importantly. Danny read the card, a sweet declaration of love written in 2 different handwritings. At the bottom, in Sile's careful script, was a simple message. "Thank you for letting me come home." "You bought me something too," she said, noticing a small wrapped box beside her coffee cup. "Open it," Clay urged. Inside was a simple silver necklace with a small heart pendant. Nothing expensive or flashy, just something thoughtful and sweet. "I love it," she said, meaning it completely. "I love you," Sile said quietly, while the boys were distracted by their own sugar-covered pancakes. "I love you too," Danny replied, and this time she wasn't scared to say it. Week 9 brought the night everything changed. Danny woke up from a nightmare about losing the boys, gasping and crying in the darkness. Before she could fully orient herself, Sile was there, pulling her against his chest and holding her while she shook. "They're safe," he whispered against her hair. "The boys are safe. You're safe. We're all safe." "I dreamed you took them away from me," she sobbed. "I dreamed you decided I wasn't good enough and took them back to your world." "Never," he said fiercely. "Danny, I would die before I hurt you or them again. You have to believe that." "I'm trying. God, I'm trying so hard to trust this." "What can I do? Tell me what you need." "Just stay. When things get hard, when I'm difficult, when family life isn't perfect, just stay." "I'm staying," he promised, holding her until her breathing evened out. "I'm staying forever." Week 10 brought their first real conversation about the future. They were cleaning up after dinner while the boys played outside, and Danny found herself watching Sile load the dishwasher with the automatic efficiency of someone who had become part of their routine. "You know," she said carefully, "the boys have been asking when you're going to propose." Sile's hands stilled on the plates. "They have? Apparently they've been discussing it. They think we're taking too long to make it official. What do you think?" Danny considered the question seriously. 2 months ago, the idea of marriage would have terrified her. Now, "I think they might be right," she said softly. "I think I'm ready to stop being scared and start being happy." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure I want to try. I'm sure I want forever with you, even if forever is scary." Sile set down the dish he was holding and turned to face her completely. "Danny Andrews, are you asking me to propose to you?" "Maybe," she said with a smile that felt like sunshine. "Are you saying yes?" "I'm saying I've been carrying a ring in my pocket for 3 weeks, waiting for you to be ready." "I'm ready," she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. "Good," he said, pulling her into his arms, "because I can't wait to marry you." Outside, they could hear River and Clay arguing about the rules of some game they had invented, their voices full of laughter and security. Through the window, Danny could see the garden where they had built their life together one day at a time. "We're really going to do this," she said wonderingly. "We're really going to do this," Sile agreed, and kissed her like he meant to keep doing it for the next 50 years. Chapter 9. The Proposal That Matters. 6 months after that perfect Christmas, spring had transformed Rosalind's gardens into something magical. The massive oak tree where River and Clay had built their fort was surrounded by blooming azaleas and dogwoods, creating a natural cathedral of pink and white blossoms. It was in this enchanted setting that Sile had decided to make their commitment official. But first, there were two very important conversations he needed to have. "Boys," he said one Saturday morning, finding River and Clay in their usual spot at the kitchen table, working on a complicated jigsaw puzzle of the solar system. "I need to ask you something serious." 11-year-old eyes met his with the kind of attention children reserved for moments they sensed were significant. Over the past months, they had grown comfortable with their father's presence, but they still approached important conversations with careful consideration. "Are we in trouble?" Clay asked, because that was always his first concern when adults wanted serious talks. "No trouble," Sile assured him, pulling out a chair so he could sit at their level. "But I need your opinion about something that affects all of us." "What kind of opinion?" River asked, his natural caution making him want specifics before committing to anything. Sile took a deep breath, suddenly more nervous than he had been before any business negotiation. "How would you feel if I asked your mother to marry me?" The silence that followed was so complete, he could hear the antique clock ticking in the next room. The boys stared at him with expressions that cycled through surprise, calculation, and something that might have been excitement. "You want to marry Mama?" Clay said finally, as if testing the words. "Very much." "Why?" River asked with the directness that still caught Sile off guard sometimes. "Because I love her. Because I love both of you. Because I want us to be a real family, officially and forever." "We're already a real family," Clay pointed out with typical 11-year-old logic. "You're right," Sile agreed, "but I want to make it legal. I want your mother to be my wife, and I want to adopt you boys so you can be my sons in the eyes of the law, not just in my heart." The boys exchanged one of their wordless twin communications, an entire conversation conducted through glances and subtle gestures that Sile had learned to recognize but couldn't interpret. "What if you change your mind?" River asked, voicing the fear that Sile knew still lived in all their hearts despite the months of stability. "I won't," Sile said simply. "River, Clay, I need you to understand something. Walking away from your mother 11 years ago was the biggest mistake of my life. I lost 11 years with you boys because I was foolish enough to believe lies instead of trusting love." He leaned forward, making sure he had their complete attention. "I will never make that mistake again. Never. You are my sons. She is the woman I love, and nothing in this world could make me walk away from my family." "But what if Mama says no?" Clay asked with practical concern. "Then I'll keep asking until she says yes," Sile replied, earning small smiles from both boys. "What if we say no?" River pressed, testing boundaries as children do. "Then I'll wait until you're ready," Sile said seriously. "This only works if all of us want it." Another wordless consultation between the twins, longer this time, with subtle head movements and eyebrow communications that spoke of years of shared understanding. "We want it," River announced finally, speaking for both of them as he often did. "But you have to do it right," Clay added quickly. "What do you mean?" "With a ring and flowers and romantic stuff," River explained. "Like in the movies Mama watches when she thinks we're asleep. She cries at the happy parts," Clay added helpfully. "So you should say something that makes her cry, happy tears. And it has to be somewhere special," River continued, warming to his role as romantic advisor. "Not just anywhere, somewhere that means something." "Do you have any suggestions?" Sile asked, genuinely curious about their perspective. "The garden," Clay said immediately. "Under our tree. That's where all the best family stuff happens." "Plus," River added with the wisdom of someone who had observed his mother carefully, "Mama likes it out there. She sits on the bench and smiles when she thinks no one's watching." "You two are pretty smart," Sile said, impressed by their romantic insights. "We pay attention," Clay said simply. "When you love someone, you notice things that make them happy." The rest of the day was spent in covert preparation. River and Clay threw themselves into the mission with the enthusiasm of children given an important job, helping string fairy lights through the tree branches and arranging flowers in mason jars throughout the garden. "She likes white roses best," Clay informed him as they worked. "And she hates when flowers are too fancy. She says simple is more honest." "Good to know," Sile said, making mental notes as they created their romantic setting. "And don't be nervous," River advised with the confidence of youth. "Mama already loves you. We can tell by how she looks at you when you're reading us bedtime stories." "How does she look at me?" "Like you're the answer to all her prayers," Clay said matter-of-factly. "Same way she looks at us when we're sleeping." As evening approached and the garden transformed into something magical with twinkling lights and soft flower arrangements, the boys took their positions as lookouts. Their job was to keep Danny occupied inside until everything was perfect. "This is so exciting," Clay whispered to his brother as they peered through the kitchen window at their handiwork. "It's like we're in charge of making Mama's dreams come true. The best part is we get a real dad out of it too," River added pragmatically. Inside the house, Danny was beginning to wonder why everyone was acting so strange. Rosalind kept finding reasons to keep her busy with correspondence. The boys were giggling and whispering more than usual, and Sile had disappeared entirely after lunch. "Where did Sile go?" she asked Griffin as he came in from outside, looking suspiciously pleased about something. "He's around," Griffin said with barely contained amusement. "Boys, I think it's time." River and Clay immediately sprang into action with theatrical efficiency. "Mama," River said, appearing at her elbow, "you should take a walk in the garden." "It's almost dark," Danny pointed out. "That's when it's most beautiful," Clay insisted, taking her hand and tugging her toward the back door. "Trust us." "Both of you are acting very suspicious," Danny said, but she allowed them to lead her outside. The moment she stepped into the garden, she understood why. The familiar space had been transformed into something from a fairy tale. Thousands of tiny lights sparkled through every tree and bush. White roses glowed like stars in the gathering dusk. And under the oak tree where she had watched her sons play countless times, Sile was waiting. He stood beside a blanket spread beneath the branches where River and Clay had built their fort. Wearing the blue shirt she had once mentioned was her favorite. In his hands was a bouquet of simple white roses, and his face held an expression of nervous hope that made her heart skip. "Danny," he said as she approached on unsteady legs, "we need to talk." "This is beautiful," she whispered, taking in the magical transformation of their everyday space. "The boys helped," he admitted. "They said it had to be perfect for you." She reached him just as he dropped to one knee on the soft blanket, and the reality of what was happening made her breath catch in her throat. "Danny Andrews," he said, his voice clear and strong despite the emotion she could see in his eyes. 11 years ago, I lost the most precious thing in my life because I was too young and scared to fight for what we had." Behind her, she could hear River and Clay whispering excitedly from their hiding spot near the house, but her entire focus was on the man kneeling before her. "You gave me 2 incredible sons who taught me what it really means to be a father," Sile continued. "You showed me what strength looks like, what grace means, what real love can survive." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring that made Danny gasp. It was her grandmother's engagement ring, the one she had sold years ago when she was desperate to feed the boys. "How did you?" she whispered. "I spent months tracking down the pawn shop," he said simply. "I wanted to give you something that meant as much to you as you mean to me." Sile ... "Danny, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that I deserve you and our boys? Will you be my wife and my partner and the center of my world?" The garden was completely silent except for the sound of her heartbeat and the distant giggling of their sons. Danny looked down at this man who had broken her heart, and then spent months putting it back together, stronger than before. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, I'll marry you." The cheer that erupted from the direction of the house could probably be heard by the neighbors. River and Clay came running from their hiding spots, followed by Rosalind and Griffin, all of them talking and laughing and crying at once. "Did she say yes?" Clay asked breathlessly, as if the outcome had been in doubt. "She said yes," Sile confirmed, sliding the ring onto Danny's finger where it belonged. "Are we really going to be a family now?" River asked, his voice holding wonder and certainty in equal measure. "We already are a family," Danny said, pulling both boys into her arms as Sile stood. "Now, we just get to make it official." "The best kind of official," Clay said with satisfaction. As the sun set behind them and the fairy lights began to twinkle more brightly in the gathering darkness, the soon-to-be Cornish family held each other close and began planning their forever. Chapter 10. The Family Comes Home. 6 months later, on a perfect October morning, exactly 1 year after the wedding that never was, Danny stood in Rosalind's bedroom looking at a woman she barely recognized. The bride in the mirror wore a simple cream silk dress that had belonged to Rosalind's daughter, altered to fit Danny's slender frame. Her dark hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, adorned with white roses from the garden, and her grandmother's pearls rested against her throat. "You look radiant, Mama," River said from his position on the antique settee, where he sat with Clay in their matching navy suits. At almost 12, both boys had grown tall and confident, carrying themselves with the easy assurance of children who knew they were deeply loved. "Like a real princess," Clay agreed, adjusting his boutonniere with careful precision. "Not the pretend kind in movies, but the kind that actually exists." "Thank you, babies," Danny said, her voice thick with emotion. These boys, who had been her everything for so long, were about to officially become someone else's sons too, and the magnitude of that change felt overwhelming in the best possible way. "Are you nervous?" River asked, studying his mother's face with the perceptive gaze he had inherited from both parents. "The good kind of nervous," Danny admitted. "Like Christmas morning nervous, not scary nervous." "Daddy's the scary nervous kind," Clay reported with the casual cruelty of childhood observation. "Griffin said he threw up twice this morning." "Clayton Andrew Andrews," Danny laughed despite herself. "You're not supposed to tell me that." "Why not? It's funny. Adults are weird when they're happy scared." A gentle knock interrupted their conversation, and Rosalind entered wearing an elegant lavender dress that made her look decades younger than her 81 years. "The minister is ready," she announced, her eyes bright with tears she was trying not to shed. "All our guests are seated, and your groom is waiting at the altar looking like he might faint from joy." "How many people came?" Danny asked, suddenly worried about the size of their celebration. 47, Rosalind said precisely, including Tommy and several other children from the shelter who insisted on being here to see Miss Danny get married. Danny's heart swelled. The homeless shelter had become like a second family to all of them over the past months. Sile had begun volunteering there regularly, and the children had adopted him as enthusiastically as they had Danny years earlier. "And Mama," River said importantly, reaching behind the settee, "we have something for you." Both boys produced small wrapped boxes, their faces shining with excitement and pride. "What's this?" Danny asked, accepting the gifts with surprise. "Wedding presents from your sons," Clay explained. "Open them." Inside the first box was a delicate silver bracelet with 2 small charms, a tiny R and a tiny C in flowing script, each one capturing light like tiny stars. "So we'll always be with you," River explained earnestly, "even when you're being married and fancy." The second box contained a heart-shaped locket on a fine gold chain. Inside was a photograph from their last family vacation, all 4 of them sun-kissed and laughing, looking like they had always been together. "Daddy helped us pick them out," Clay admitted. "He said every bride should have something special from her children." "Oh, boys," Danny whispered, tears threatening to ruin her carefully applied makeup. "They're absolutely perfect." "Don't cry yet," River warned urgently. "Save the crying for the actual wedding part." "Happy tears don't make you blotchy anyway," Clay said knowingly. "Only sad tears do that." Music began drifting up from the garden below, the string quartet playing the processional Danny had chosen. Her stomach fluttered with anticipation as she realized the moment she had dreamed about for months was finally here. "Ready?" Rosalind asked gently, helping Danny fasten the locket around her neck. "Ready," Danny said, taking her son's hands. They made their way downstairs and through the house to the back garden, where 47 people were seated in white chairs, arranged in a perfect semicircle around the oak tree. The tree itself had been decorated with thousands of tiny white lights and flowing ribbons, transforming it into something magical even in daylight. Under the natural canopy, beneath an archway made entirely of white roses and baby's breath, stood the man Danny was about to marry. Sile looked devastatingly handsome in his black tuxedo, but it was the expression of pure wonder on his face when he saw her that took her breath away. "He's crying already," Clay observed with scientific interest as they paused at the garden's edge. "Happy crying," River corrected, as if this distinction was crucial. "The best kind," Danny agreed softly. The music changed to the bridal march, and the guests rose to their feet. Danny walked down the petal-strewn aisle with the son on each arm, exactly as they had planned it. "We both helped raise her," River had said when they were discussing wedding logistics. "We should both give her away." "Except we're not giving her away," Clay had corrected. "We're all staying together." "Even better," Sile had agreed. Now, as they approached the altar where Father Benedict waited with a warm smile, Danny could see friends and family wiping their eyes. Maria from the shelter sat in the front row with several of the women Danny had helped over the years. Griffin stood beside Rosalind, both of them beaming. And scattered throughout the crowd were the children from the shelter, dressed in their very best clothes and watching the fairy tale wedding with wide, wondering eyes. They reached the archway, and River and Clay stepped back to their positions as ring bearers. Sile moved forward, his hands slightly shaking as he reached for Danny's. "You look beautiful," he whispered, "just for her." "So do you," she whispered back, making him smile through his tears. Father Benedict, who had watched their family come together over the past year, looked at them with genuine joy. "Dearly beloved," he began, "we gather today not just to witness a marriage, but to celebrate the creation of a family that was always meant to be." The ceremony was simple but deeply meaningful. When it came time for vows, Sile spoke first, his voice steady despite the emotion clearly visible on his face. "Danny," he said, looking directly into her eyes, 11 years ago, I lost you because I didn't understand what love really meant. I thought love was about feelings and passion and romance. I didn't know that real love is about choice." He paused, glancing at River and Clay, who were watching with solemn attention. "You taught me that love means choosing each other every day, even when it's hard. You taught me that love means building something together that's stronger than anything either of us could create alone. You raised our sons to be extraordinary human beings while I was too blind to see what I had lost." His voice grew stronger as he continued. "I promise to choose you every day for the rest of my life. I promise to be the husband you deserve and the father our boys need. I promise to protect our family and cherish what we've built together. Most of all, I promise to never take for granted the miracle of finding my way home, to you." When it was Danny's turn, she looked into the eyes of the man who had broken her heart, and then spent a year putting it back together. "Sile," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I used to think love meant holding on no matter what. I learned that sometimes love means letting go and trusting that what's meant to be will find its way back. She smiled at their sons, who were both discreetly wiping their eyes. You gave me River and Clay, and then circumstances took you away before you could see how magnificent they became. But they brought you back to us because love doesn't die. It just waits. Her voice softened as she spoke directly to his heart. I promise to trust you with our future, the way I trusted you with my heart 12 years ago. I promise to choose forgiveness over fear, hope over doubt, and love over everything else that tries to divide us. I promise to be your wife, your partner, and your best friend through all the joys and challenges ahead. When Father Benedict asked for the rings, River and Clay stepped forward with matching grins, carrying their small velvet pillows with exaggerated care. Don't drop them, Clay whispered to his brother with mock seriousness. I never drop anything important, River replied with dignity. Do you, Sile, take Danny to be your wife? Father Benedict asked. I do, Sile said firmly, sliding the simple gold band onto Danny's finger. Do you, Danny, take Sile to be your husband? I do, Danny said, placing Sile's ring where it belonged. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Sile, you may kiss your bride. The kiss was soft and sweet and full of promise, sealing vows that had been tested by time and proven unbreakable. When they broke apart, the crowd erupted in cheers and applause, but the ceremony wasn't quite finished. There's one more piece of business, Father Benedict announced, gesturing for River and Clay to join them under the archway. Sile has petitioned the court to formally adopt River and Clay, making them legally his sons. The boys flanked their parents, suddenly looking older than their years, as they participated in this final, crucial ceremony. River and Clay, Father Benedict said, do you accept Sile as your legal father? We do, they said in unison, their voices strong and sure. Sile, do you promise to love, protect, and cherish these boys as your own sons, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails? I do, Sile said, his voice breaking with emotion. With all my heart. Then by the authority granted to me by the state, I declare that River and Clay Andrews are now officially River and Clay Cornish, beloved sons of Sile and Danny Cornish. The cheers that rose from the small gathering were filled with genuine joy. River and Clay launched themselves at their parents, creating a family embrace that would be captured in countless photographs. We're really the Cornish family now, Clay said, his voice muffled against Sile's jacket. We were always the Cornish family, River corrected. Now we just have the paperwork to prove it. The best kind of paperwork, Danny laughed, holding all three of her men close. As the sun reached its zenith and the celebration moved toward the reception tent Griffin had set up on the lawn, the newly official Cornish family paused at the edge of their garden. They were surrounded by friends who had become family and children who believed in happy endings, heading toward a future that finally felt secure. So, Sile said as they watched their guests make their way to the celebration, how does it feel to be Mrs. Cornish? Like coming home after the longest journey imaginable, Danny said, standing on her toes to kiss him again. Can we have cake now? River asked, because even momentous occasions required practical considerations. All the cake you can eat, Sile promised. And can we dance? Clay added. I want to dance with both my parents. You can dance until your feet fall off, Danny laughed. As they walked toward their reception hand in hand, Danny felt a peace settle over her that she hadn't experienced since she was 19 years old. This was what happiness felt like. Not the desperate, fragile joy of youth, but something deeper and more enduring. They had found each other again across 11 years and countless obstacles. They had built a family from broken pieces and proven that some love stories don't end. They just take the long way home. "I love you," she said to Sile as they entered the tent where their friends were waiting to celebrate. "I love you too," he replied. "All of you. Forever and always." "Forever and always," River and Clay echoed, the family motto they had unconsciously adopted. And as they stepped into the warm light of their reception, surrounded by love and laughter and the promise of all their tomorrows together, Danny knew that some fairy tales really do come true. They just require patience, forgiveness, and the courage to believe in second chances. The end.